Hello and welcome. My name is Mildred. In this tutorial, we are going to look at how to configure the development side of things to use version control. We are going to be using Git and GitHub for our version control, and then we are going to learn some basic command line commands that we will need to be able to exchange information between our system and GitHub. The first thing to do for Windows users is to come to git.scm.com and then download for Windows. Once your download is done, you head over to your downloads directory or whichever directory where downloaded files are saved, and then you double click to start installing Git. Now I have Git already installed, but I am going to demonstrate this for the purpose of this lesson. So when you click on yes, you click on next. Next, leave the default option selected, click on next, and then use nano editor by default. We want to say yes and leave it there. You want Git to decide the default branch name, and most of the time the default branch is master. If you have other branch names, if you've been using GitHub and you want your main branch to be named main or any name you like, you can override that and specify a name for your default branch. So we'll leave it as the default selection. We click on next. You want to use Git from the Git bash only, or you want Git from a command line and also from third-party software. Leave the default selected, click on next. Leave the default selected, click on next and next. Just keep leaving the default, next, next, and then next, 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 install. I have a previous installation that will be removed by this installation. So now that it is done, we can launch the Git bash and click on finish, and the Git bash is launched. If you come in here on a new day, you can come to your search and search Git, and you want to open the bash. So we're going to be using the bash to write our command. So this is the easiest way. There are other console emulators for Windows like Commander that you can download and use, but the commands remain the same as long as you're using a bash shell command. And you type git config global user.name, and then in a pair of quotes you put your name. You want Git to know your email. Git config global user.email, and then you type in your email. You want to make Git output color coded. You put git config global color.ui and set it to true. You also want to ignore file mode changes. You do git config global core.file mode and you set it to false. And now you're done with the configuration. So assuming we did not set our default text editor, you can use git config global core.editor and we'll set it to nano. So this is how you configure your Git to start with. You want to look at your configuration. You use git config and use the list flag, and it gives you the list of all of your configurations. So this is the basic way to configure Git. Now the next thing we are going to look at is the basic command line commands that we will need. Now this is going to the end of my screen. I can use a clear command to clear everything to start back at the beginning. If I want to look at what my directory address is, I'll use pwd, which means present working directory, and it tells me I'm in my C drive in the directory called users and in the directory called lovely in the users directory. If I want to change my directory, let's say I want to go to my desktop, and my desktop in my OneDrive folder, I will say change directory. My OneDrive folder is in my lovely folder, so I'll say change directory, OneDrive, and I want to go into the desktop there, and it comes like this. If I want to list all the files on my desktop, I'll use the list command, and then it gives me the list of all my files. And because my files are not available offline, it is going to try to download them first before it lists. And so I have all of my files listed. Sometimes we have files that cannot be displayed, they are hidden. You can use list and the AL flag like this to list even those files with a // and it gives you the list of also hidden files along with your files. Now, let's say we want to create a new file on the desktop. We use the make directory command with the name of the new file. Let's say I want to use course file as the name. This will create a new folder in my present working directory, which is my desktop. Now, when I list the desktop, I'll find a new folder called course file. If I want to create a file in this course file, I'm going to change directory into the course file folder, and then I'll create a new file there with the touch command. And let's say I want to create a file called trial.txt. When I list my course file, I'll find that I have the file called trial.txt. If I want to edit that file with the command line, I can use nano trial.txt. It opens the nano for me to save a file here. Let's say I want to just create the basic HTML template here. So I'll stop here just for demonstration. And then I will save. I'll use Control X. And it asks me if I want to save. I'll click on Y and I'll click on Enter. And then when I come back here, I still find my trial.txt. When I nano here again, I'll find it here. And if I go through the text editor, maybe I use Atom or I use Notepad, I will still find this text there. So these are some basic commands we'll use. There's a concatenate command. I'm going to show you how to use that. And there's a remove command. Let's say I want to remove this trial.txt file. I'll use remove. I can use the I flag for interactive, which means ask me before deleting a file. But if not, I'll just put remove trial.txt. And when I list now, there is no file in the course file folder. For us to start using Git, first of all, if this is your first time using Git, or if you're not sure if Git is installed, you type the Git command like this, and it gives you a list of the usage, which confirms that you have Git installed on your system. And this command is basically for Bash shell or for Mac system. But for Windows system, you use where.exe, Git, and then it gives you the installation directory of where Git exists on your system. For us to start using Git with GitHub, we need to be able to have a way to have these CI/CD effects where we can continuously develop and integrate all of our development. So we want to be able to push all of our code from our system to our source code repository. And in this repository, all we want to happen is to have different versions. And we can also always reverse. We can publish, and we can also use that to make our codes available online. For us to start doing this, we have to establish a secured connection between our development system and github.com. And how do we do this? We first need to create SSH keys, and SSH is one of the most secure ways in which you can transmit files over the internet, and we are going to use this to be able to communicate with GitHub from our system. For us to start, we want to change directory to the home directory or the root directory. So I'll use cd, I'll use the ~, and this takes me back to the root directory. For you to generate SSH keys on your system, so I'm going to generate the SSH key by using SSH keygen t RSA c and my email address. I don't want this to be saved as ID RSA. I want it to be saved as, let's say, new key. I don't want a password. SSH already super secured, but if you're in production, you might want to use a passphrase. I'm going to click on enter to keep ignoring this, and I have this saved in my SSH directory. So if I navigate to my SSH directory, let's say cd.ssh, and I list all of them. I don't have it listed here. So what I will do while I'm here is to generate my SSH keys here. So I'm going to repeat that same code here, and I'm going to try to create a new key here, and I'm going to name this key, let's say key 1. I don't want a passphrase. I will click on enter. It has been saved. When I list, I'll find my key 1 and key 1.pub. The .pub is the public key for you to use. The key 1 is your private key that remains on your system. So you don't allow these keys to be exposed, especially your private key. But your public key is the key you share between your system and github.com. How do we share this? So I can use cat key1.pub, and it gives me the key. So what I'll do is right click and copy, and then I'll head over to github.com, go to my settings here, and then on the left I will see SSH and GPG keys. I will click on new key. I'll put a title for this key, let's say new key, and then I'll paste the key I have copied here, add SSH key, and then now I have a connection between GitHub and my system. I want to test this connection. SSH t git at github.com, and because I use my ID RSA as my key, my main key for the system, which I do not want to change, but in your case you are going to have your key 1 or whatever name you give your key. If you want to leave the default name as ID RSA, that's okay. And I have a passphrase for this, which I will enter, and then it will give me hi, my GitHub username. You've successfully authenticated, but GitHub does not provide shared access. Once you see this message, you've now established a connection between your system and github.com. And why is this useful? We are going to see that in the next lesson.